the things that we get gratification from the external world, whether they're positive or not, we need more and more and more and more of that to be satisfied and feel the way we want to. Mm-hmm. But when we turn inward and we get those, whatever those, if it's joy or if it's fulfillment or if it's abundance, anything that we're seeking externally, if we turn inward and train ourselves and condition our subconscious to tap into those experiences internally, which we all can do, you actually you need less, and the more you do it, the less and less you need of it, and the longer it lasts.
Welcome to Alignment Adventures. This is a podcast where we explore what it means to live a fulfilling, aligning, and present life. I'm your host, Lindsay Tanner, and I am so grateful that you are here. Hello, my loves, and welcome back to another episode of Alignment Adventures. I'm so grateful and glad that you joined me today for another beautifully expansive and aligning conversation with poet and novelist Shaun Randall. Now, this conversation is so magical, and I just love how beautiful his journey is. I find it so fascinating hearing people's personal journey and hearing how they got to where they are and where they've been. It's just so fascinating to me. But he is the author of 4 different books: Words Like Wine, A Peace of Mind, Letters from Lima, and The Manifestation Method. So we definitely talk about all those different books. They range from poetry to metaphysical fiction to explaining how to manifest. So that is obviously one thing I bring up with him, is his takeaways on manifestation and how we're basically doing it all the time, but how to really leverage that process to create a life that aligns with you and that you love and that fulfills you. And then we also touch on the quantum field, which is so interesting. I love bringing these spiritual topics together with science. That just feels so resonant for me. And I feel like that helps get a lot of people on board when they hear how it connects with a lot of studies that they're doing in science. So it's fascinating to hear his takeaway on manifestation in the quantum field. We also talk about parenting, which is something that obviously is super resonant for me. But even if you're not a parent, I think the lessons and the takeaways from that conversation are applicable to life in general. I really just love Shaun's message of everything is within you, and to follow your passions and do the things that make you happy. And just remember to look within and not the external factors for finding your happiness and alignment. I just really, really resonate with that message. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and get into the conversation. I know you guys are going to love this one. Shaun, thank you so much for coming on Alignment Adventures. Already from talking to you before we even hit record, I know this is going to be amazing and so insightful for my audience. So thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me on, Lindsay. I'm excited to see where this conversation goes. The sky's the limit. So
totally. Well, I'm going to start with the infamous question that is impossible to answer, but we're going to try. And who is Shaun Randall?
Yeah, so Shaun Randall's a conscious expression of the universe. It's kind of how I think of what my existence is on a very sort of macro level. And, within that, I feel like I'm that consciousness's way of trying to learn more about itself and discover itself. And it's, as each of us as individuals, we're something unique that the universe is using to play with itself. And so that's kind of how I view who I am. And then I get to be different things. So I'm a son and a brother, and I have my fiance, who's the core of every day for me. And what I do is it's weird. I think for the first time in my life, the person that I am is not dependent on my partner, but is massively influenced by them and their presence. And so I feel a tremendous joy with getting to reciprocate my side of that and be a great partner to her. And then, I'm a writer. That's what I do for fun. That's what I do for my work. And that's what I do to try to make a difference. My ultimate purpose is to help people find themselves, who they truly are, and find their way in the world. It's not the same as my way, and it's not, they won't use the same words or the same language as I do, but it's important that everybody has that sense that of who they are. It's this question that you ask, we should all try to answer that, and it changes from day to day. And so yeah, that's who I am. I won't go any further. I think that's a good place to land.
Perfect. Beautiful answer. And I agree. We were just talking about the quantum field, which we'll get into later. But if you think about it that way, we're constantly changing and evolving. So trying to answer that question, like you said, it's such a good practice. And I love how you took it from a deep level then to like the identity level of like a son and a fiance. And one more thing on that, I used to say this all the time about finding a partner, like they should be the cherry on top, not your whole world. So just love all the things you're saying so far.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, it's a weird, it's something I've wrestled with intellectually. My relationship with her is she's transformed who I am. She's an integral part of who I am. The thought of her not being in my life in the future is a devastating thought if I allow myself to think about that. And so I go, well, wait a minute, do I have attachments? What am I clinging to something here? Am I looking for something outside of myself in the external world to make me happy and bring me fulfillment? And the answer is yes. That's what's happening in that moment. It doesn't mean that I'm obligated to continue down that path or that thought. And so I can quickly kind of recalibrate and go, wow, what a wonderful gift that it is that I'm able to experience in my life right now, and I'll keep enjoying it as long as it exists. So but yeah, it's relationships, and a successful relationship is such a weird thing to navigate when it comes to personal fulfillment, because it's just, I think, probably the most powerful thing we experience is in our human, or one of the top two or three things that we experience while we're in this life. And so giving it its proper place is a challenge, to say the least.
Agreed. And I love how you are vulnerable in that attachment. We become so attached to things, but you gave a beautiful example of like being aware of that and then just kind of reframing it and taking it back to gratitude that you have her in your life in this present moment, because that's all we ever have. So much goodness right off the bat. But before we get into any more rabbit holes, because I know we're going to go down so many and I'm so excited for it, but just kind of give us a taste of what living in alignment means to you.
Yeah, for me, we all have our these desires in our heart, and we have this inner voice. And I feel like when we're kids, we live in alignment most of the time as children. And it doesn't mean we don't have things that disrupt us or upset us, but what we do is we have this inner monologue and we pursue it, and we don't know any better. And as adults, we forget what that was like. And we get distracted by all the stuff that's in the external world, whether it's our careers or relationships, or even something as noble as like, I want to do my life's work and I want to be great at it, and I want to leave this great contribution to the world around me. Even that is potentially a not a distraction, but it's a gravitational pull away from what's truly inside of you, and that inner voice. And so it's important, or it can be, I should say. So it's important just to listen to ourselves and our inclinations and what it is that we want to do with our life. And so to me, that's alignment, is when I hear that voice and then I'm living accordingly. So, if, for example, I might be in a taxi cab in Lima traffic with snarling, engines revving and horns going, and it's difficult for me in those moments to be living in alignment. But I've learned, well, you're still able to think, and you're still able to be who you are. And so it's like I look at that and I go, well, I'm learning about myself, and I'm learning about the world around me, and I'm able to kind of remove myself from a chaotic situation. And so I find alignment in that okay, well, what my purpose is to help people deal with these distractions and these chaotic things. It's the most bizarre thing. I fervently believe the universe gives you what you need before it gives you what you want. And all I want to do is live like next to a body of water, whether it's a lake or an ocean, and there's not a lot of people around, just that tranquility. And yet I've lived in Lima now for a little more than 2 years, and I lived in Chicago for 12 years before that. So the last 14 years of my life have been in modern city environments. And it's because I encounter every day the challenges that the world puts in front of us to kind of connecting and being ourselves. So, long way around the track there. But to me, living in alignment is that everything that you encounter, you realize it's part of the journey that you're on, and just listen to whatever it is that's in front of you. Listen to that voice, and in that moment, really kind of connect with yourself. That's what living in alignment is. What living out of alignment is my God, would these horns stop honking? Would this traffic let up? I just want to get to where I'm going. Why can't things just be the way I want them to? Or, as a writer, if I'm working on something and it's like, well, why can't I just break through this writer's block? Why can't I just make this right? And then when I go back and read it, why does it have to suck the first 3 times I read it? Why can't it just be from my brain to my keyboard? And so living in alignment is just in that moment realizing, well, you're crafting something, you're sculpting, you get to play with words. How incredible is that? And so when when the game doesn't go your way, just realize you take another turn and you go back at it. And so that to me is an alignment, is that you persist through the challenges and the struggles that we all face. They're all different for each of us, but we all have them. That's what's universal. And realize that it's part of what the universe is giving you, what you need to craft who you want to be. And so that to me is that's I guess my personal alignment. And I would say that there's some universality there that for most of us, it's just being in touch with what we truly want, and realizing that the things that are happening around us are a part of that process. The universe is happening on our behalf in those moments that seem like they're not. If it feels like the universe is not going your way, you are not in alignment, put it that way. And it's, of course, easy to feel that way.
I love that explanation, because a lot of times I know even my mind can get attached to, okay, living in alignment means I'm living like perfectly or doing this perfectly.
Yeah.
And things don't go perfectly. Like you said, you get what you need in that moment. And that is just such a grounding and freeing way to see your reality, as whether it's a high or a low. This is what I need in this moment to step into the next version of myself. And it's not about feeling, high vibe all the time, even though it's amazing when we do, but it's the highs and the lows and just using that to navigate you. So I love that explanation.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. For me, one of the things that I try to impart to students is that when you're trying to manifest and when you're trying to create this life you want, what you're trying to do is feel a certain way. And it's, as humans, if that's complex, we want to feel a lot of different ways. And I think the key is realizing that anything that makes us feel great, however we define that in a given moment, that comes from the external world, whether it's a great career or a great relationship, there's a lot of positive things that come from the outside world that are great and make us feel great. And then there's some things that are potentially detrimental. If you eat a candy bar, you feel great for some period of time, but in the long run, if all you eat is candy bars, you're not going to feel great. And the interesting thing that I found in my life, and I found it to be true, at least in a majority of our species, is that the things that we get gratification from the external world, whether they're positive or not, we need more and more and more and more of that to be satisfied and feel the way we want to. Mm-hmm. But when we turn inward and we get those, if it's joy or if it's fulfillment or if it's abundance, anything that we're seeking externally, if we turn inward and train ourselves and condition our subconscious to tap into those experiences internally, which we all can do, you actually need less, and the more you do it, the less and less you need of it, and the longer it lasts. When I started, my meditation practice, personal meditation practice, this is during the pandemic is when I got heavy into it. And I was meditating for like 3 and 4 hours. It was a luxury that I had at that time. I needed that at that point. Now I can meditate for 5 minutes and reset everything. The truth is I can do it in about 5 seconds. I can reset myself. And that's because I've done it for hours. That's because I've done it every day. And I think that but the key is that you turn inward for whatever it is that you think is lacking or isn't happening the way you want to. If you keep looking outside of yourself, you might find it. You probably will find it. That's the challenge of the modern world we live in, is there's so many things where we do find great experiences and we do find pleasure. And it's easy to go back to that. And it's harder to go and turn inward to find those things, because that takes work, and it takes vulnerability, and it takes some upsetting realizations from time to time. But when you do that work, then it opens up an incredible access to experience whatever you want to, whenever you want to.
That's always one of my intentions I write down, because it's so easy for me to forget. And it makes me mad how easy it is to forget that everything I need is within me. And I'm going through my day and I'm like, oh, I wish I had this or that more trap that you just talked about. So easy to fall into that more. But then I just stop and remind myself, okay, everything I need is within me. So do you have any tips on like remembering that and creating like that lasting feeling and connection inside yourself to like, okay, everything is within me? Is that like a meditative thing? Maybe we can connect it to that, or any tips you have on just embodying that more.
So I think that skill of remembering and kind of turning yourself inward as opposed to externally, it's practice.
Yeah.
And so it's, there's this tricky thing that happens with our emotions, and that, so I'm trying to think of a very common real world example. You're late for something. For those of you who are never bothered by being late, I'm sorry, this example will go over your head, but many of us are when we're running late for something, it creates stress or anxiety. And so and that's a big one for me. That's why it pops into the front of my head. And so it's easy for me in that scenario to forget that I have everything that I need internally. And the importance that I'm personally placing on being on time isn't nearly as important as I think it is. And whatever the outcome of me being late for that, I have the solution inside of me. It's just, there's some other opportunity that will occur. That specific thing, I trained myself that the most powerful thing you can do when you're late is apologize and express gratitude for the other person's patience. So I was in real estate before I came to Lima, and I've been living here. And so what a beautiful moment and opportunity you have with a client or a colleague or anything like that, just to set the tone of who you are. And it changes everything. But I lived my life for years not being able to capitalize on those opportunities. And now flash forward, I'm a dramatically different person. I still struggle with the same thing. I still get upset about being on time. Like it's hardwired into my subconscious. And so I think whenever there's something like, what you're talking about, it's like I have to remind myself that everything I need is internally, whatever it's different for everyone. And so, it's just a matter of realizing when you're taken out of that, the quicker that you realize you've been taken out of that, just finding something that can put you back into that place. And so, I think there's verbal cues and physical cues are really, really important with that. That's just part of how we're wired as humans. And so, if you forget that everything's internally, think of a phrase that'll remind you. Silly rabbit tricks are for kids. I don't know what it is, but something like that when you catch yourself, you can do it. But the first thing I said is really the key is that you practice it, that you're aware that this is something that you want to do. And then you do it over and over and over again.
Yeah. It's like any other training. You just kind of go and you train and you build that muscle per se. I feel like this is a really good lead into something that you teach on a lot, and that is manifestation, because from my understanding of manifestation, it's about feeling those feelings, right? Which we kind of already touched on, which we already have within us. And then that kind of matches what's in the quantum field from my interpretation. So I'd love to hear like your explanation of that. I'm definitely not qualified to talk about the quantum field, but it fascinates me.
Well,
Anything you want to share on this subject?
yeah, here's the cool thing is none of us are really qualified to talk about the quantum field. The people who are most I am not a quantum physicist. I think that's important to say from the outset. And the people who are, the more that they know about quantum physics, the more mystery is involved in it, and the less that they can speak with authority on it. And people who do speak with authority on it get nervous. And that's probably true about most things in life, is people who are really super confident and speak with authority. Put your radar up. Those are usually the people steering civilization off a cliff. But with all that said, one of the things that's kind of been a driving force for the work that I've done in this, and I have a book coming out called The Manifestation Method, is I would hear people all the time, they would be talking about positive thinking or the law of attraction and manifestation. Those things get lumped together. And I would hear all the time, I hear this, and it makes me cringe, is I can't tell you how it works. I can just tell you that it does. And it's like, oh, that feels so good. But I think to the question you just asked, it's like, well, how do I remember to look inward? It's like, well, you need a process, you need to practice that. And so manifestation is harnessing the quantum energy that surrounds every single thing that's in existence. And existence itself is consciousness. Mm. So, matter as we think of it, the picture that I see in front of me as I talk to you, the coffee mug that I've been drinking from, that stuff is made of energy. It's not made of stuff. That's the breakthrough of the 20th century, is that stuff isn't stuff anymore, and it's energy. And once you start to realize that everything's made out of energy, it occurs to you that maybe you should start to understand how that directly relates to you in your life. And that's what manifestation is realizing that you are part of an energy field that is infinite and boundless. And without having a choice, you are tapped into it, wired into it, connected to it. The choice is whether you use it or not. And so, what quantum energy is it's everything. So I try to stay there as opposed to get to a really super technical explanation of it. And manifestation is simply directing that energy to condition your subconscious mind, your conscious mind, so that your behaviors turn yourself into the person that you want to be. So if you see a video on Instagram and it says, like, share, and comment, and you'll have $1 million in your bank account by March 1st, if you manifest it, there's a fancy technical word for that. It's called bullshit. What manifestation is realizing your place in the universe and realizing that you're all powerful and that you can change the outcome of what's happening in your life. And you do that through the conditioning of your mind and the building of who you are as a person and becoming the best version of the person that the universe has created you to be. And, so I think that, the question you're asking in terms of quantum possibility in that quantum field, going back to the, like quantum particles exist within like anything's possible, and then suddenly they become something. Certain molecules will take 1,000 years to decay, and certain will take 500 years to decay. And so we realize that anything can happen in the world of quantum physics. And we realize that these particles with all these infinite possibilities don't actually become something until they're observed. That's mind-blowing. So once we try to measure them, observe them, they spontaneously become something. And so we don't really fully understand how all that works. And then that also flies in the face of relativity and the way that the larger universe works. The larger universe doesn't work like that at all. And so in the scope of the things that are in the larger universe, they tend to be Einstein's theory of relativity and his perspective of time was that everything has already happened, and we're resting on the knife's edge of now, and the past is on one side and the future is on the other side. And if we try to step to one side or the other, the knife just moves with us. You're always in now, which is true. And there's a very powerful truth in that when you realize that, you're always now, tomorrow never comes. The quantum world applies completely in the face of that. And what the quantum world says is that whatever is can become something different. We don't know what it is. And it's essentially infinitely possible. So the different realities that we experience in life, they all exist simultaneously across an infinite field. And the question is, how do we get to the ones we want versus the ones that we don't want? And that's what manifestation is. And I think, an analogy I like to give is when it comes to manifestation, and kind of even to the question that you start with is, who is Shaun Randall? What is alignment? Well, I think of a chessboard. And so you've got all the squares within the square, and then just start stacking chessboards side by side to the left and to the right. And then each of those chessboards has, horizontally and vertically, they have chessboards going out all the other directions. And so now visually you have this infinite field of a chessboard. And then quantum possibility is that layer of chessboards actually has another layer above it, and it has another layer below it, and so on and so forth. And so when the question is, what piece are you on that chessboard? That's what the external world conditions us as humans to think. Are you a pawn that can move one square at a time, not very powerful and not very meaningful? Maybe you're a knight, you can make the cool little L-shaped moves, or you're a bishop, you can go in any distance you want, but you've got to go diagonally. And a rook, the same thing, but you can only go vertically or horizontally. And the queen can go any direction, any amount, but her sole purpose is to protect the king. And so, a lot of us spend our time feeling like pawns and trying to be queens or kings. And what manifestation is realizing that you're the chess player, you're not the piece on the board. And you move the pieces, and you determine which squares your pieces land on. And, you can move from one board to the next board. And, in fact, when you get really good at manifestation, you're like, well, I don't want to move my knight in an L shape. I want to move my knight diagonally and vertically. And I want actually my pawns to be queens. And so that's the layer of it. And that's, I think I probably overshot the question and went wide, but it's a difficult thing to answer. It comes from understanding that anything is possible in this universe. We live in a probabilistic universe. Everything is cause and effect. And so when you realize that you can actually control the causes and the effects, then you've acquired the power of manifestation.
That was a perfect answer. So many things I want to say, but what I find so interesting, this is such a hot topic. Everyone's talking about manifesting. What I find interesting is that we are innately manifesting all the time. It's just like a matter of being aware of it and being intentional with it.
Yeah.
It's just that I think that's the key piece. Like you said, when you realize how limitless you are, you're like, okay, this is the reality I perceive, but there is so much more that I just don't understand. And so many of the things you said, it just takes a minute for my mind to absorb it. Like, we are all energy, and there's only the present moment. And I just find that stuff so fascinating. But tapping into it and being intentional with it, I feel like is the key with manifestation.
Yeah. Well, you said something that is so profoundly true, and that is that we are all innately manifesting. And so, whether we are aware of it or not, we're creating the outcomes of our lives. And it's the alignment question, right? Part of when we know we're in alignment is when we feel like we're not in control, right? The world is spinning around us outside of our control. And that just comes from a misperception of what the nature of our existence and our place within the universe truly is. And I think it's like, if you're swimming in the ocean and a big massive wave is coming your way and you're like, oh, I better get out of the way. And then you're like, but I can't get out of the way. So, you figure out, you either swim or you duck or you do whatever you want. Well, the ocean doesn't worry about the wave. The ocean is the wave. And, that's Rumi. We're not a drop in the ocean. We are the ocean in a drop. And the closer you can get to feeling that experience on a moment to moment basis, the more you'll be in alignment, the more you'll enjoy your life. And that's, and that's when you're manifesting yourself as to who you want to be. And I think it's, it's a journey, and it's something that it's easy to decide you don't want to do it. Mm. That's really what it comes down to. It's much easier to decide, I'll let the wave hit me, and whatever happens will happen. Yeah. And there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that either. But it's a matter of saying that I'm going to let go of feeling like there's a wave coming. I'm going to surrender to the human experience that I'm having in this moment, and realize that that's not the nature of my reality. The experience that I'm feeling is the subconscious programming that I've been conditioned for since I was a child. Most of our parents love us. We're that's the nature of our species. And most of our parents are really bad at raising children. And part of that is because their parents were really bad at raising children. And saying that somebody's really bad at raising children is probably hyperbolic on my part. But what it comes down to is children don't need to be raised, right? We don't need to be fixed and molded and taught the way that we perceive. We need to do that to ourselves. And that's a human instinct, is for us to correct and steer other people. And I still fall into this trap. It's like, once I've learned something, man, do I want to talk about it? Man, do I want to tell everybody else about it? And that's great. And when people are open to it and want to talk about it with me, like today, this is fantastic. I have a euphoric feeling. But the reality is, it's not my responsibility, nor my obligation, nor something that anybody else needs for me to impart what I've learned, because what I've learned is different than what they need to know. All of our experiences are completely independent of that. And I think, I had a friend who told me, I don't remember why, this was years ago, but we were just talking about parenting, and it was the most profound advice I had heard about parenting and about living life all in one phrase. And he said, the purpose of a parent is to help the child become themselves. And I was just like, wow, mind blown, right? And it, I didn't have kids at the time. I still don't, soon. But I was like, man, that's all of our jobs for ourselves. And so, but what happens, unfortunately, when we're young and when we're children, is that our parents and our family members and well-meaning members of society try to prevent us from the negative experiences that they've had. And in doing so, they're giving us all kinds of subconscious conditioning, well-meaning, that doesn't serve us, and is in contrast to our true nature. And I think as the world becomes more populated, and as we live in more populated, community-oriented places, there's a lot of benefit that comes from that. But I have lived it, and I've experienced it enough to know that if you really want to find yourself, go stand on top of a mountain when there's nobody else around. And it doesn't mean that you hate people or that you don't understand community or anything like that. But being by yourself, and you can do it with closed eyes in a dark room as well. You don't have to go to a mountain, but that getting as close as you can to yourself and just listening to yourself, and frankly, listening to the nonsense that goes on in your brain all the time. And having that conversation with yourself and sorting those things out, that's really, really crucial.
Well, as someone that just had a baby 7 months ago, that is something that is hyper in my awareness. After, I have all these conversations all the time, and I'm like, wow, we pick up so much from our childhood. And it really is just like a transfer of trauma sometimes. So I try to be as aware as I can. I know I'm going to give him some complexes. I'm like, okay, hopefully I'll just give him the tools to work through that. But that's such a good point that you've made.
Yeah, well, and I think, it's interesting you talk about traumatic experiences. And I think, what we feel is trauma, most of us, what we feel is
Mm,
trauma, you start to look at experiences that other people have and the conditions that other people um, have experienced. And you're like, wow, my traumas are not really traumas, but they are traumas, and they have a profound impact on us. I think what's really difficult, the traumas are not, once you're honest about them. This happened to me, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I'm still doing stupid things as an adult because this happened. Those are kind of like obvious and easy answers to find. What's really tricky is like, why don't I want to get out of bed and go exercise first thing in the morning? I wrote that in my journal, you know. Well, there's little things that is conditioning that behavior that isn't some horrific trauma or some error in judgment by your parents. There's just little things that we've picked up on. And I think what's really scary now, um, I sense it as an adult. What we have all these information appliances, our TVs, our smartphones, just we're constantly being bombarded by information. We're not capable of consciously processing all that. So our subconscious mind is being programmed, and it's taking in all this information. Well, now our children are being, and for some generations now, are being raised in that same environment. So you know, there's a lot of stuff that's happening in the world around us that's affecting us. And so the key is to figure out, okay, well, how do I find a way to get inside of myself, and then still live in this thing called existence and the universe. Um, you know, I was having this conversation with a student a couple years ago, and they wanted to be a Buddhist monk. They were like, if I could just do this, I would, and then I would have inner peace and contentment, and I could just leave the world behind.
mm-hmm.
And I think there's some percentage of humans who were created to be Buddhist monks, and that truly is their fulfilling place and calling. For most of us, would yeah, I don't know, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 minutes. It's not. It's like it's not nearly. It won't end up being nearly as appealing as it feels like it will.
Mm,
Um, it's like the picture of heaven where everybody's lying in green grass playing a harp next to a sheep.
yeah.
Well, do that for 5 minutes and then tell me if you really actually want to do it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the challenge. That's the core of what I try to learn about myself and figure out every day. It's like, we do have this crazy modern world around us that has um, so much excitement, right? And
Yeah.
this conversation we're having, across the globe, we're on different continents having a conversation in real
Yes.
time, and that's incredible. I don't want to trade that so that we're all, sitting on the mountaintop with, our middle finger and our thumb pressed together, for some sort of like illusion of peace, because I don't think that's really truly what peace is. I think what peace is being yourself and doing what you are designed to do, what you want to do, the true
Mm,
instincts that you have. Um, Alan Watts said that man suffers because he takes seriously what the gods made for fun.
mm,
And
mm.
I think that's the condition of the modern world that we live in, is we're taking something way too seriously, that is ultimately so much fun. And so the same thing with kids. I think we want our kids to go to school, and we want our kids to kind of find professions and vocations, and be successful and have well-adjusted, happy lives. And we don't want them to fall off their bikes without a helmet, and all kinds of crazy things that we don't want for them. And the truth is that it's first of all, it's not in any of our control whatsoever. And I think of um, I that there's no thing that can happen to any of us that is irreparably harmful, short of dying. Dying is
Yeah.
dying is a mysterious aspect of our existence that
Yeah.
I don't have an answer for. Um, Making that feel better when it happens, right? It's a traumatic loss that can't be recovered from. But everything short of that, let's just
Yeah.
start there, is a learning opportunity, and it's an opportunity to grow. And I think sometimes the things that we prevent for, and we're talking about children, it might as well be allegory for ourselves. We put the same guardrails on our own lives.
Yes.
And when we do that, we don't realize that we're actually kind of corralling ourselves in from better opportunities and things that we would experience more joy from.
No, this is such a powerful conversation to have, because I agree. We still have that like child within us. So this is applicable whether you're a parent or not. And a question I always seem to go towards with my guests, and I just feel like it always connects back to this, everything that we've discussed. Do you feel like discovering our true nature, finding inner peace, is that our purpose? Like, that's just something I wonder all the time. Like, why? Why do we come here, get conditioned, and then work on getting unconditioning ourselves, like, and remembering who we truly are? I would just love to hear your take on that. Like, do you think that's our true purpose, or do you think we all came here with unique purposes along with that? Or I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. So I think you're asking me two things
Yes.
in one question. And so the first way I'll answer it is that our purpose changes. This was something that changed my life. I felt like my true calling was kind of always elusive. Like I had things that I was really engaged with and enjoyed as a young adult, and was successful vocationally, um, and at different times had more or less meaning in those things. But I always felt like, well, the thing that I'm really supposed to be doing, I'm probably not doing, and I don't know exactly what that is. There's things that I'm good at. There's things that I would, if money were no object, I would spend my time doing. Um, and I think that I think that that's a condition we all deal with. And I think one of the things we have to realize is that our purpose changes all the time. My
Mm,
purpose when I was 12 is not the same as my purpose now, because I wasn't capable of doing when I was
mm,
12 what I'm capable of doing now. My purpose as my partner's fiance didn't exist before I met her,
mm,
but it is a massive driving force of meaning in my life. And so the universe provides, the universe is giving us what we need before it gives us what we want. And part of that is because it has roles that we will have to step in and fill. It's our choice whether we meet the moment or not. You can't be forced to do anything. um, but there's these, situations that arise, and we tend to think of them as bigger blocks: career, my opportunity to be a partner, my opportunity to be a parent, those things. Well, those purposes and roles that are big like that there's small ones that are happening all the time. That person that you're walking past on the street who's asking for some money, they don't need money from you. They need something else. And what that is, only you can decide. I've got some ideas in my brain. I don't want to speak them because the reality is the universe gave you a moment right there to provide a
mm,
purpose. And
mhm.
it's not to cast judgment on them, and it's not to feel great about yourself because you took money out of your pocket and gave it to them. There's something else layered in that interaction that's available for you. If you um, my fiance had a good friend who found three puppies in the trash, and um, we 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 inherit, puppies. They were probably about 10 days old when we got them. Their eyes weren't open, and so they had to be hand fed. They didn't have their mother, and so my fiance was waking up throughout the night every 2 hours to do this. And I remember, and I'm being awakened by it, but I'm not waking up and participating in this in any shape or form. And I thought, man, this is not fun. This is not easy. But and my fiance was exhausted after doing this, and but she had this, oh, just, this purpose, right, that was brought into her life by the
Mm,
universe to do that. And um so then, the next layer of that story is we put the word out that we were looking for a substitute mom, another, dog that had a litter that could provide milk for the puppies.
Mm-hmm.
And we found one that had somebody had observed this dog that had been abandoned on the street, but she had milk, and so we took her in, and um, she was, it's like she comes in the house and she sees the puppies, and she's like, she doesn't know, are those your puppies, or my puppies? What's going on? She has no idea. And um, the long story short, she didn't have very much milk for them, and she didn't, the first, like, it was like more than 24 hours she was with us. She didn't go to the bathroom, and then finally she went to the bathroom, and there was some pee pee, but there was also blood staining the white. She's a husky, so she had this beautiful long white fur,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like, oh, we've got Houston, we have a problem here. And so she ended up having retained placenta, and her uterus had to be removed.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out her spleen was swollen like 5 times the size of normal, so that had to be removed. And so, well, what was the purpose of those puppies being abandoned in the trash? Well, was it to get to my fiance so that we could get this dog? And help the other dog out that probably would have died with it. The vet said that she didn't have more than a couple of weeks of life had she been out on the street. And I that dog was the most amazing dog that I've ever interacted with. Seeing her go through that battle, and she couldn't give milk, but she was like licking the pee-pee and caca up behind the puppies, and she was letting them, suckle and climb all over her.
Mm-hmm.
And here's somebody. This is a dog that was clearly a pet before, so it had been abandoned. It either lost her litter by it being pulled away from her, or she may have miscarried. We don't know that. And I watched this dog transform after the surgery into this like vibrant, giving, amazing creature filled with joy. And we'd go on these walks, and she would chase the birds, and she almost pulled us off a cliff. Where I live is near the ocean here in Lima, and there's these like hilly cliffs, and there's this path that I would take, and she literally like darted through the hedge with me in tow, and almost pulled us off a cliff chasing this bird. But it's like, and she was constantly, wherever we would walk, she wanted to go to the next phase. And then one day we went to the beach, and she was off leash, just like cruising down the beach, over the waves as they came in. And I'm watching this, and I'm like, she doesn't know she can fly. She can't fly. This dog doesn't know that she doesn't have wings. And I thought, man, she's right, I'm wrong. And so when you talk about purpose, like, what was the purpose of all this stuff to happen? Well, I grew an immense amount. And then what do I do with those experiences? So the ripple effect becomes crazy. And this is all because somebody ran into some puppies this is horrible, right? Abandoned puppies. Can you think of a more heartless moment? But somebody for whatever reason was in a low vibrational state that did that. And so we can find purpose in anything. The point of my story is we can find purpose in anything. And then I think the second part of what you asked is the bigger question of the why are we here? And I don't think that that's knowable in the way that we experience knowledge. But I think so. Everything that exists is consciousness. We live the everything that we experience, we're experiencing consciously. And that's because everything that exists is a conscious experience. And that conscious experience can only come from one thing, and that's another conscious experience. And I think, now it's like, it's become popular to say, well, like we could all be this computer simulation. That could be true. I don't have any reason to know that isn't true. I can't remember the professor's name, but this came from a professor who actually logically deduced that it's more likely that we're living in a computer simulation than we're not, just from a probabilistic standpoint. So then you would go, well, why did the person make that computer simulation? And you can't answer that question, right? Until you're outside of the computer simulation, you can't answer it. And I think So I don't believe that we're living in a computer simulation, but we're living in a stream of consciousness, and that consciousness has whether it had a choice or not to exist, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
but within that, it has the ability to create, and so
Yeah.
it's created things that can also create. And so I think the why we're here is so that consciousness can figure out how it works, and
Yeah.
to play with itself. That's what I come down to.
Yeah.
And is that trying to find out why might be why, the experience of it, right? Not that
Mm-hmm.
we have to have that answer, but the experience of um, getting to sort through all this, and the getting to talk to one another and communicate, um, and figure things out,
Yeah.
and then realizing that, you know um, the thing that is so profoundly confusing is maybe not nearly as confusing. Maybe it just is because it is.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, thank you for going on that journey with me because I agree we won't have the answer, but it's just so interesting to think about. And back to your purpose, I agree. It could be something as small as, helping these puppies, or as big as, helping millions of people. It changes day by day. And that is just comforting for me to think about that. Like, I didn't come here for one specific thing, and I'm not going to like miss that thing if I'm
Yeah.
not paying attention to it. I came here to do millions of different things that are going to
Yeah.
affect everyone else. And when it comes to simulation, that is something I've been thinking about a lot recently. I used to play The Sims a lot as a child. I don't know if you're familiar with that game, but it's literally like playing life. I'm like, oh my gosh, what if I'm the Sim? And then going
Yeah.
back to another thing you said, if that's true, if this is a simulation, like, why would I not be having more fun? Why would I not be prioritizing fun and
Yeah.
creation over all these other things that I worry about? It's just funny to think about. So good.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think um, I, I think at least for me, that was a monumental turning point. Is when I realized I didn't have one purpose. I had as many as
Yes.
I could possibly imagine. But and that's not to say that we don't have a true calling. I think we do. We do have things that we're uniquely gifted and designed to do. That not only do we have the talent, there's this burning desire and passion, and so I think we find them. We find them by accident. Normally, it's
Yeah.
like if you think of like a virtuoso um, musician, their parents just happen to have a piano, right? And
Mhm.
they just happen to kind of sit there and kind of stumble into it. When Mozart wasn't like, I want to grow up and be Mozart, and it's somebody like Michael Jordan or LeBron James, who are so dramatically gifted at something that
Yeah.
it's objectively easy to identify the talent and
No.
see what they are. But we all have something that we're Michael Jordan at. It's just it's harder for most of us to kind of find it. But there's something that lights each of us up. For me, it's writing. Nothing lights me up like writing, and being able to craft words um, and do that. So um,
Agreed.
that's
Just follow
that's
your passion.
yeah, and I think that's what the fun of life, if you look at it, is that you get to find what
Hmm.
that is. And it's a choice. Am I going to be miserable until I find it, or am I going to enjoy everything that I do along the way to kind of figure out what it is? And I will be vulnerable and say I was miserable for years trying to figure out what it was, um, and that was my subconscious programming. So
Well, this is a beautiful lead into my last few questions for you.
okay.
You're a writer. So tell us a little bit about how people, I'm sure they're going to listen to this and be like, we want more of Shaun and his energy. Like, how can they connect with you and work with you, mainly through your books, or do you have other things that you do as well?
Yeah, so the best place to find everything I do is my website. It's www.shaun, SHAUN dash Randall, RANDALL.com. So you can find my books there. And then I do work with students. I've got, programs to teach manifestation and help people kind of discover what their true nature is. And then, I help people visualize and plan their path forward. That's what I think my best skill is teaching people how to manifest and then guide them to actually doing it. I don't work with students and tell them to think about $1 million being in their bank account and then just we hope it gets there. So we figure out who it is that we're trying to become and then put a path in place. My writing is so I write different things. My first 2 books are poetry.
Mhm.
I'm a poet by birth, I guess. I started. My dad was in radio and television, and I would remember, like, as a little kid, I would write these little jingles and these little, like, um, plugs and commercials, and I would pitch them to my dad. None of them ever got anywhere, but I started writing things that rhyme when I was a very, very young child, and I love poetry because you can take something that's incredibly mysterious and a few phrases. You can't necessarily you don't necessarily unravel the mystery, but you make somebody realize that there's a common experience that we're all having within that, and um, you know I think that's what poetry is it's using it's painting pictures to help people kind of um, understand the experiences that they're having and realize that they're not alone, and connect. So I've always loved poetry. So my first 2 books were poetry, and then my latest release at the end of last year is called Letters from Lima, and that's a metaphysical novel.
Mhm.
And it's a uh, you know I, the thing I don't like to give away plot points of the book. I want people to actually
Mhm.
read it and experience it. But it's about the human experience of what I said before, that the universe will give you what you need before it
Mhm.
gives you what you want. And so you have Colin Allweather, who's this expat from Chicago, and he's a hard drinker, and he's had kind of a tough life internally and emotionally. He's career wise and material, he's successful, but he feels miserable and he's depressed. And he's in Lima, and then Carolyn Grant, who's also from Chicago, has gone to Lima to find her estranged uncle. Her grandmother has sent her to find this jewelry box that her estranged uncle has because she wants to. There's something important in it that she wants to pass on, and so it's this kind of coincidental meeting. These two collide, and um, yeah, I don't want to unravel the plot points,
Mhm.
but it there's a love story between the two of them that unfolds, and it's about how do we relate to our families. It's about how do we find what we want in life, and it's about how do we um, experience inner peace and find, it's all the stuff that we've been talking about, but it's in the form of a story, and it's set in Lima. And I came. This is probably the thing that's um, important to know about the book, and really kind of where I'm at in life. I came to Lima in March of 2020, and I was taking a vacation. I was a real estate agent in Chicago, and it was towards the end of winter, and springtime is the busy time of that business there. And so I wanted a break and I wanted to get out of the cold. So I went south of the equator where it was summertime, and I met my now fiance. Spoiler alert, um, on that trip. And I remember sitting in the airport on the way back, and she had given me this leather bracelet. I still wear it right here, and it's
Mhm.
got this infinity symbol on it. You probably can't see it very good.
Mhm.
And I remember sitting in the airport looking down, and I thought, man, can that be true? Because for the first time in a long, long, long time, I felt that way about our connection. That I'm a part of something that's massively greater than anything I could ever really want and need. And I'd been through a lot of kind of self-inflicted harm for the decade before that, but I'd been working and putting the pieces together and had done so kind of going into that. So I was going back to Chicago. It was March 10th, and I was going to dive into my career and have a great spring season. I was looking forward to going back and forth to pursue this new relationship I had happened. And by the time I got back in the next weekend, the city of Chicago and my career and the world was all shut down. And it was like, well, everything is outside of my control in this moment. And that was the gift of my lifetime, because I realized that the things that I wanted in life, I could only find them inside of me, and that everything that we think we want, that we can just feel in the palm of our hands and grab, it can slide through your fingers in a moment's notice if it's in the external world. So that's when I took that time and I started really diving into writing, and I started meditating 3-4 hours a day. And I was in a car ride back from Florida. I had driven down there from Chicago. It's about a 20-hour car ride. And again, this is during the pandemic. So I didn't want to, I was going to see my dad, and I didn't want to, be exposed to virus or anything like that. And so on this car ride back, I was just sorting through all kinds of things, and you've got the headlights are coming in the night, and all of a sudden these two characters, Colin Allweather and Carolyn Grant, just started talking in my head out of nowhere. I'm like, and I'd felt that kind of creative inspiration before, but I'm driving, I'm on the highway, I can't write right now. And so I immediately start to freak out, that like, oh my God, I'm going to lose this. I'm not going to get this. And then I stopped and I thought about it. And I said, well, this is the culmination of everything that you've been working on to tap into quantum energy and manifest. It's happening right now. And you're not going to prevent it from continuing to happen by being worried about losing it. Because if you do lose it, it'll come again. Like that was the kind of this transformative moment where I'm like, everything I need, I have, and it's all within me, and it's whatever's happening in the external world is just the universe's way of prying it out of me. And so I about 15-20 minutes, thankfully I was close to my, I don't want to sound too miraculous with remembering it. I was about 20 minutes away from the hotel. I got to the hotel and got this conversation kind of pulled out of thin air, and that was the beginning of the book. And it was also that same trip was also me deciding, instead of when the borders opened for flights, I wasn't going to come visit Elliot, my fiance. I was going to come down here and see what happened next. And so that's where it came from, was those experiences I had kind of pre-pandemic and the pandemic. And it's that anything can happen if you're open to it, if you're able to receive it, if you let yourself be treated by the universe, then amazing, great things will happen. And for me, the cool thing, I was a writer before I wrote that book, but I wasn't. I hadn't written a novel, and by the end of it, I was somebody who could write a novel, and so who I became in the process of it, and is pretty empowering. And that's really what Letters from Lima is about: is the external world, and the seemingly endless stream of bullshit that can be thrown at us in our modern chaotic worlds. And what is it that we do with it? Because we do have a choice at the end of the day, and so it's a powerful story. It'll make you laugh. It'll definitely make you cry. I've had some of my most austere friends tell me that the book made them cry. They couldn't believe it. So it's a powerful emotional story. And the book that's coming out soon is called The Manifestation Method. So that's a work of nonfiction. And it's a lot of what we've been talking about, but the source of it is, it's a comprehensive system. It tells you how to manifest. It doesn't tell you to do positive thinking and hope for the best. It's a system of practical knowledge and information. And it's great when I've been working with students with these ideas for a couple years now, which helps me kind of hone it in and figure it all out and work through what the book became. But I thought, at some point I'm not going to be here, and this book is, it's kind of, there's a part of me that I feel like my work won't be done, but I'll feel like there'll be a piece of me that feels like I've imparted the best that I have learned up to this point in my life. It's available for anybody. It's not for everybody, but it'll help a lot of people. And my work's not done, but I feel like it's if let me put it this way: if I died today, I would feel like I left something, um, behind, or not left something unfinished. And
Mhm.
um, that's, to me, it's my life's work is to help people find their true calling, find their purpose, and then realize that they can kind of, just by being themselves, they can take control of their future and live the life that they want to live. And so that's what manifestation method is how do you bring abundance, joy, and fulfillment into your life.
Mm, Incredible. Thank you for sharing your journey because I think we need more examples of that. Other minds do, to remind us that it's about like flowing through life and like being okay with uncertainty. And, sometimes things just come to you and trusting that and being open and being curious. That was just such a beautiful example of all of those things. And I'm adding letters from Lima to my list.
Two.
What's interesting is I have a nudge recently to like take a break from self-help books or spiritual books and like read more. I
Yeah.
mean, this could be a spiritual book, but read more like fiction. And that's just like
Yeah.
perfect timing.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's great. Well, I will look forward to talking to you privately about your thoughts afterwards on it. And it's interesting. I was talking with an agent, and then another conversation with a publicist, and this is almost a year ago, and about what I do and what I write, and they were both just like, yeah, I don't know how to market that. I can't market a poet, novelist, nonfiction writer. And I thought, well, that's not, you know that's too bad. Like, I'm not gonna, like, I'm not gonna just do one thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not the first writer to write different kinds of material. And the core of my message and the purpose of why I write doesn't change, just the
Yeah.
vehicle in which I use. And there's people who can't stand poetry. They would never read my poetry books. They would never get anything out of it.
Yeah.
But they'll pick up letters from Lima and they'll be like, wow, this story is transformative and
Mm,
powerful. And I think, there's other people that they would never be able to extract meaning from a nonfiction or from a fiction novel, but they would read a fiction book,
mhm,
I can't speak,
mhm.
a nonfiction book, that's more prescriptive, and that's perfect for them. And
Yeah.
so, I like the different formats. My passion, um, I don't know how many nonfiction books I'll write in my life. It'll be less than the amount of fiction and poetic works. There's something about, um, particularly when I write, I'm trying to get people to think about the nature of reality and the nature of
Mm,
their existence
mhm.
within it. And I don't want to tell them how they should think about that. I just want to get them to think about that. And so fiction is a powerful tool to get people to kind of dive into themselves. Um, when we read nonfiction, we're reading it in our voice. We're hearing
Yeah.
ourselves say the words, but we're still tapping into like what somebody
Yeah.
else has said. Even from choosing it, we're like, well, I think that this author's fantastic, so I'm going to, read what they have to say, and I'm going to place extra value in it because of who they are, um, or because of what the message feels good to me. Whereas fiction, um, I get to make you not feel good about what the story is, and I get to make you not feel good about
Yeah.
what the message might be, as much as I get to make you feel good about it. And you sort through that
Mhm.
process yourself as the reader and the thinker and the chess player, as the person who's going to make the decision of what the next move is. So
Well, thank you for being true to yourself and your message and, not putting yourself in a box. And you're like, I'm a multifaceted person. I'm going to write these things that I'm feeling called to write. So
yeah.
thank you.
Well, Lindsay, you and I and everybody listening have something in common, and that is that we do not belong in boxes. We are
No.
limitless.
Yes.
So
Yes. If you take
um,
anything, take that. And that brings me to my last two questions, and I'll let you go on with your life. Uh, this question I just love to ask because it just kind of helps paint a picture of like who you are and what you like to do with your free time. But what's one of your favorite, I call them alignment activities, where you just love to do it just for fun, for pure joy, time and space seem to float away when you're doing it.
um, yeah, I play piano.
Mm.
And I bring this example up because I don't have a piano here in Lima in our apartment. And long story short, it's because I didn't think when I moved here that I would be here 2 years later. Um, and along the way, I keep thinking I'm moving back to the States sooner or later. So I've never gotten one. Um, and but historically, through my whole life, that's always been an escape for me, is to play piano. Um, and it's interesting. Something that I have a profound appreciation for now that I didn't have when I would play the piano myself, is to actually just sit and listen to music.
Mm.
And it can be any different kind. When I write, I typically listen to classical music because there's no words, and the classical music is so emotionally evocative, in a subconscious way, because it's not as, if you're listening to like a hip hop track, it's exciting and it's energizing, and you're physically like engaged in the song. That's what it does, and that's the power of it, and that's great. Classical music has this sneaky way of, like, you stop listening to it. It's there and it's going on, but you're not
Yes.
necessarily consciously thinking of it. So, um, I when you said, kind of escape, and I don't effortless joy. I don't remember the words you use, but I think of that. The activity that I've replaced playing piano with here in Lima is I'll either run or walk. I live in Barranco, which is a district within Lima, and like 2 or 3 blocks from the cliffside. And so I'll walk through the park and to this, the trail where the ocean is out there, and it's just, I look at it and I feel limitless, and I feel like, man, this world is so much bigger than I realize, and anything's possible. And I bring up Barranco because it's really cool, because it's like, we would think of it as like a park, but
Mm.
it's like this long garden, this elongated garden of all these cool tropical plants, and different hedges and trees, and just cactuses, and all kinds of just cool, unique stuff. And so I'll kind of run through that trail, or walk through that trail, and there is literally nothing in terms of anxiety or stress that I can be feeling before that will prevent me from becoming effortless and filled with joy. And it might take it might take a kilometer for me to get there, but depending on what's going on. But so that to me is just, it's my escape into nature in this city of over 10 million people that I live in. And there's all these condo buildings, and there's other people and everything going around on, but it's so just breathtaking and beautiful. And I love, one of the things I love about Lima, and I love about Peru. There's a ton of historical archaeology here, and Peru has so many examples of the best of what human creation is. And I don't think of like our buildings and our architecture as separate from nature, because as humans, we are nature. So is a
Mm.
beaver dam different than nature? It's
Mm.
not.
Mhm.
And so just because we've made something out of glass or metal doesn't make it less natural. But we tend to think that way. And it's that's what I've realized in being here too, is that really escaping into nature, and that pure um, uh, natural existence, that we once you experience, I feel bad. I feel like millions of people haven't experienced it, don't know what I'm talking about. I know you do,
Mm.
and probably most of your audience does. But that connection where we know we're not the drop in the ocean, we know we're the
Yep.
ocean, and you feel that.
Yes.
That's what's cool about that stretch of ocean front, is that you can be, you hear the cars that are in the highway below on the cliff, and you hear dogs barking and people riding their bikes, and all the things that are human life are all happening around you, and yet you're not affected by it the same way, because your mind is captured by the beauty of the ocean, and the beauty of these landscaped gardens that people have created. It's so that's my happy place, is going and seeing that stuff.
Yeah, I find it so interesting to hear what people do to reconnect to that feeling. And I think it's a good reminder for everyone else. It's the simple things like going for a walk in nature or doing something that you love, like playing piano, that help you reconnect to your nature. So my last question for you, if you had to give anyone listening one piece of advice, maybe that's on this journey of discovering themselves or their purpose or whatever, what would that one piece of advice be? I know that's kind of hard sometimes.
Uh, I, I I think it can be hard, but for me, it's a very simple answer, and that is just be yourself. And when that but the advice part is when that doesn't feel right, when you're feeling resistance, be it expectations of family or we in a modern world we're programmed to desire certain things materially and create these own expectations for our life. And when that doesn't feel right and normal, that is your intuition telling you something, and you have to listen to it and just be yourself. And I for years I spent my life thinking that who I wasn't good enough, and that if I only accomplished X in my career, if I only had a great perfect relationship, and not for everybody else to see this stuff, for me, I wanted this stuff to feel like I had amounted to something, and that ultimately what it goes back to is that I was valuable and I was worthy of being loved. And all of that is just utter nonsense that our brains tell us over and over and over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
And it's relentless. And I turn that voice off and just be yourself and do what you want to do, and enjoy life. And that doesn't mean that life is not free of effort and free of struggle. The effort and the struggle of life is actually where we find the most joy and the most satisfaction. And so when you run into that resistance and that barricade of this is what I want to do, whatever your dreams are, if somebody out there is listening is, I want to be a novelist, I want to be a writer, it is well within your reach to do so. Just don't do anything else until you do that.
Mm.
And I think that to me is the advice: is do what it is that you want to do, that you passionately feel you are called to do, and everything else falls by the wayside. And that doesn't, if you want to, as an example, if you want to be a writer, it doesn't mean that you don't have to have a job to pay your bills. It just means that's just something that's not the thing that you're doing. That's not your life's work. That's just something that you're doing in the meantime, and view it that way. And so that to me is the essence of life: is be yourself, do what you want to do, pursue your passions, and the things that are your dreams and your desires, never ever ever discount them. Don't ever put them to the side. There's nothing more important than who it is that you wish to become. And when you do that, here's the cool thing: when you do that, all the other stuff that you're worried about not having actually ends up happening for you in your life. And so that's maybe that's why we're here, is to figure out that being what we are is the most important thing. And maybe the universe is trying to figure that out for itself. So but yeah, that's it. Just be yourself, do what you want to do.
Perfect way to end that. Shaun, thank you so much for this beautiful conversation, this beautiful co-creation. Just go do the things you want to do, people. Go do the things you want to do that you feel called to do without expectation. So thank you so much, Shaun. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Lindsay. It was great being here.
Shaun, thank you so much for coming on Alignment Adventures. I know so many people are going to find those takeaways very useful for them. So if you want to connect with Shaun, of course, you can go to his website, Shaun, that's SHAUN Randall, RANDALL.com, or you can connect with him on Instagram at Shaun_Randall_. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. If you are new here, please subscribe. We have new episodes every week on Monday, and sometimes we have a bonus episode coming out on Fridays, but at least one episode a week. Sometimes they're interviews, sometimes they're solo episodes with just myself, but we're always discussing and exploring what it means to live an aligning, present, and fulfilling life. Please screenshot this episode and tag myself and Shaun. My handle is at Lindsay with an A.M. Tanner. With any takeaways that you have, I love seeing your takeaways over on Instagram. And please share this episode with anyone that you think needs to hear this specific message. All right, my loves, that is all I have for you in this one. And of course, I will see you in the next episode of Alignment Adventures.